Continuing now with our lead story, Donald Trump on the job at the White House. Joining us from Washington, Charles Krauthammer. Did I miss anything about the first day, Charles?
No, but I think there's something about the march that is, I think, even more significant. What the media are doing. What they're doing now, and I don't think this is a concerted effort. This is not orchestrated. This is simply, I mean, the media being overwhelmingly liberal, they think the same way. But what they are doing is to try to call this the Tea Party of the left. They have been kicking themselves since 2009, 2010 for missing the Tea Party phenomenon, which became enormously important in the by-elections, the elections of 2010, in the loss of the House and the Senate by the Democrats over time. They ridiculed the Tea Party, they condescended to it, they ignored it. So what they've tried to do is to look for that on the left. And they started with Occupy Wall Street. Remember, the New York Times' own ombudsman said they were promoting the cause, pretending it was a real movement. It was nothing of the sort. It was spoiled, unemployed, overeducated college students who blew away with the first winds of winter, disappeared. This, they see, the march of Saturday. Look at the headlines, Tea Party, left-wing Tea Party, can they revive it?
Yeah.
The fact is, it is not. They are overestimating it. They're going to promote it, and they're going to fail.
What about the Soros factor? When you have this kind of a billionaire behind 50 of the groups that sponsored the march and donating, according to reports, $90 million to those groups, that seems to be a little frightening when there's one guy and his crew, you know, pushing this as a democratic movement when it really is a contrived movement, is it not?
You can put all the money you want into all the organizations you want, but the 500,000 people or so who showed up in Washington were not coming because of the waving of money or because a bunch of groups had the funding. Look, all groups have funding. The conservative groups, liberal groups, far left groups, big deal. That was real people showing up. My question to those real people was, where the hell were you on election day?
Well, they probably they just lost. But don't you feel,
I don't know
don't you feel
they
showed up because they were told to show up? I mean, look, if you look, at the totalitarian governments in the 20th century.
You're told to show up?
Yeah.
Who tells anybody to show up?
They live on the
websites.
Country. These people live
yeah,
live
well,
on
what's
the
the threat? What's the threat? Why do they have to go?
Well, they have to go. They don't have to go through a negative. They have to go to be with their brothers and sisters and to show their solidarity and that they're good people and fight the fascist racists. I mean, it's a whip-up. And if you study history, all the totalitarian regimes were fueled by whip-ups, okay? And the people turned out to the street. Were they spontaneous? No. They were very well organized and targeted. And the target this time is Trump, to get him out of there before the 4 years are over.
Look, you know, if you're talking about the fascists in the 20s and the 30s, they actually took over governments essentially by force. We're not talking about that. You know, when you're talking about people showing up, being whipped up, you're saying free people read the internet. They decide they sympathize with this idea or group. They get on a train. They get in a car. They cross country. They go to a demonstration. How is that different from the March on Washington in 1963? Were they whipped up? Yes, by a civil rights movement.
Here's how it's different.
I don't think there's a movement here.
Here's how it's different. The civil rights movements in the 60s and all of the demonstrations that took place were against injustice. All right? You could see it. It was there. All right? Same thing with Vietnam. A lot of people felt war was not being waged properly. It was unjust. Working soldiers, working-class soldiers were being exploited, and on and on. There's no injustice here. This is a perception of fascism and racism and bigotry. All right? There's no proof. You can't provide it. This is a contrived demonstration, Charles. It's not based on reality as the 60s were? Go.
Well, I mean, you're talking about perceptions here. Are you aware of how many communist groups there were for the March on Washington? How many there were in the Vietnam anti-war
sure.
movement?
A lot of them. Absolutely.
SDS, you know all of these. A lot of them were funded by unsavory sorts.
And the folks should
who's
know
to
this.
judge what's the real? Look, what they're protesting, to the extent that they actually have an ideology. And, you know, there were all kinds of groups with a lot of weird causes in there. It was more amusing to me than frightening. What they're protesting, if anything, is Donald Trump and the threat they perceive coming from him. Well, we have a democracy. You settle that at the ballot box. But they have every right to express themselves.
And I said that.
And you may judge, well, you may judge it as a
I think there's something more
misperception.
nefarious going on behind the scenes than you do.
Oh,
I really
come
do.
on.
Are
you really So you're afraid of these?
I'm not
you're
afraid of anybody.
Of these women, are you?
Not afraid of anybody.
Yes, you are.
I think
You
there's
sound
a lot of
Women
things
with
behind the
money.
scenes that it's not going to be reported by anybody. That there's a lot of manipulation going on, a lot of propaganda going on, a lot of bad things going on that people should know about. That's my job to tell them.
All right, well,
and to have a robust
I
debate with
understand,
you.
but I would recommend less paranoia, less conspiracy, and a little relaxation. It will be okay. It was just a demonstration. They are not going to take over the White House.
I'm going to take
you
your
have my
advice.
personal guarantee.
And tomorrow's talking points will be delivered with me in a hammock. Relaxation.
No. I'll just I'll prescribe the Valium. You take it as
Never
directed.
take it. Never. No drugs for me.